Ladies and gentlemen, dear Ambassador, dear Mark, it's a pleasure to host this part of the conference at our premises, and you're absolutely right. This is now getting to be tradition, and I'm very much proud of it. And I do appreciate it very much, our cooperation with ICD, because I think that nowadays it's quite important to have the open channels, to have a dialogue, to exchange information, to have some kind of view and somehow knowledge about the different corners, about the different attitudes from the different countries. I'd like to be today focused on Croatia and our experience because I'm quite sure that we managed to make in the last 3 decades, a little bit more than 3 decades in a short period of time, a very strong and very unique transformation of the country, who was not recognized by the end, at the beginning of the 90s, who passed through the brutal war and aggression throughout 1990s, and nowadays, now is Croatia the member of the EU, NATO, we are in the Schengen, we introduced the Eurozone, we are among the 15 countries from the Western side and Central European side who are participating and being the member in all of the international organizations. So it was a fantastic success from our side, which was not an easy path, but eventually it could be a kind of example and role model for the other countries who are under the different circumstances in Europe nowadays trying to make this transition. This was definitely not easy, but again, I want to refer just very briefly to what was mentioned from Mr. Meyer today. Germany and Croatia was a success story from the very beginning, and Germany is partner number 1 from Croatia in economy, in tourism. In the European Union, we are shaping our European policy together, and I'm very much grateful for my government to be appointed as ambassador to Germany. I want to say that Croatia, from our point of view, is not an isolated country, and Croatia needs to be, from our point of view, the part of the European and global solution. I think that even the stronger countries, the biggest countries of Croatia, the bigger countries of Croatia could not on the individual basis fix some open issues, like, for example, COVID. COVID was a very good example how only through and exclusively through our joint cooperation we can find a joint solution. Now, the Russia aggression is definitely an impetus and the warning for Europe that we have to be together, because the situation for Europe from the Russian aggression is not only the fact that we are trying to support and defend Ukraine. By supporting Ukraine, we are supporting ourselves, because today what is happening is in Ukraine, just only a few hundred kilometers from here, could be happening in most of the European countries. So this unprecedented solidarity in Europe is extremely important. I want to say that another very important message, and I'll touch upon this issue, is about the Global South. This is a kind of very new situation for all of us to understand that so far we were not focused in the right way to our partners in the Global South. But I'll tell you a few remarks about Ukraine, because this is the most important issue nowadays, globally, worldwide. And I want to say that what was mentioned by Mr. Professor today about neutrality from Sweden, from the point of Sweden, is the message for all of the European countries nowadays. Nobody could be neutral nowadays. Nobody in Europe. Nobody. This is not going to happen anymore, because we are all exposed. And my full support from my government to Sweden and to Finland is already in NATO, but full support for Sweden to join NATO, because we cannot afford ourselves this kind of neutrality regarding the war, what was started and undertaken by the Russia side. Therefore, my country has been very much actively supporting and participating in efforts to support Ukraine throughout the mission EUMM. Within the European Union, we are very much in favor to see the joint European efforts regarding the recovery conference, for example, in London, to support our friends in Ukraine. But also Croatia is offering two very important efforts from our side to our friends in Ukraine. First of all, we do have from the 90s a very diverse, fruitful and successful achievements in the field of demining. So we will organize in October International Donor Conference on humanitarian demining in Ukraine. This is quite important because better we'll start with this kind of activities in Ukraine. Secondly, we run a very successful mission in the 90s, the UN mission in peaceful reintegration of this part of territory of Croatia, which has been considered nowadays as the most successful UN mission worldwide. And this is the reason why we will try to offer this to our friends in Ukraine, to see how can we make eventually peace and reintegration of Ukraine. Now we are coming to UN, and I think it's quite important to understand that there is no solution, especially for the small countries, to preserve integrity, neutrality, independency, etc., without abide the UN Charter. UN Charter is specially created, of course, for all of the countries, but especially for the small countries, to be equal, to be on the same footage. So I think this principle is nowadays very important, and this is the reason why my country is very strongly advocating the basic principles of UN Charter. Just imagine all of our situation. This is not a perfect context. We are discussing about the reforms of the United Nations Security Council. It is not going to be easy to achieve certain reforms, but for the time being, we gotta stick with international order, because not only democracy versus autocracy is at stake. I think at stake is also order versus chaos. I think it's quite important to somehow consider our positions and to be pragmatic and to understand that United Nations are indispensable in the current situation. This is the reason why I am trying to draw the parallel between the 90s in Croatia and the current situation in the United Nations. Now I'm coming to the point of NATO, because it's another important international organization, and we are standing before Vilnius summit. Full support for accession process for Finland and Sweden. It's quite important to connect from the Croatian point of view, make a stronger access between northern and eastern and southeastern part of NATO. This is quite important in order to show unity and solidarity between European Union, between the countries in the European Union and NATO nowadays. Because this is the goal of Russia. The goal of Russia is to make disruption, to make the European Union and NATO, to make disruption between our unity. This is exactly to make a rifts between our countries. So we got to show the unity to find a pragmatic solution for Ukraine. In order that Ukraine and the other countries, the open door policy needs to be preserved, to show that our countries, that NATO and European Union are still united in order to show opportunities and promises to our friends in Ukraine, in Moldova, in the Western Balkans, also in Georgia. This is quite important. Now, I wanted to touch upon position regarding China. it's a challenge for the Western society, definitely. And we gotta be stronger when it comes to all of the questions in terms of communication strategy. All of the countries, from Germany to Croatia and other countries, are facing difficulties to spread out important messages, to fight against fake informations when it comes to the crucial issues worldwide. I think that China is, from our point of view, very important, and we do not have any illusion about some of the China's recent steps. We should perhaps reflect on what China's future meditation efforts would mean for us. We gotta stick with the pragmatic and balanced policy in relation with China. And from our point of view in Croatia, one China policy is, of course, still very important to be acceptable and to understand this very important pillar of our positions regarding China. Again, it's very important to keep on with the unity on the Western side. The unified position within the European Union and between Europe and United States is very important. Therefore, we are following what are the Germans doing with the national strategy with China. And I think that we came very close to the position within the European Union to understand that our position is rather de-risk than decouple. This is quite important. But the European Union cannot afford themselves anymore to be totally on the side of dependency of China's strategic sources. This is the position of our country as well, but the Indo-Pacific region remain definitely very crucial. Africa was today touched upon, I guess, also from the other speakers, and I am listening very often, and somebody said that what we have been seeing in approach from the Western side to Africa till nowadays, instead of investing, we were lecturing countries. On the other side, we see that some countries like China and Russia are extremely influential and successful by making investments in China. It's a geostrategical issue, and everything is today geostrategical issue. Everything. And the foreign policy and diplomacy has been totally changed nowadays. You see that we have, for example, energy diplomacy. We have all kinds of diplomacy. So everything is getting very geostrategically shaped. So with Africa, we definitely need to make renewed partnership based on the equality and mutual respect. It is quite important also with the whole global South. And therefore, we are considering to accept the bilateral trade agreements between some of the countries and to have a dialogue between European Union and Africa, but with the full respect to independency and national sovereignty and interests of the African countries. This is the reason why ICT is so important, because we can have and run the dialogue. And I'm very much glad that this position is now getting as a high priority for many countries, including Croatia and Germany. The advantage of Croatia is that we didn't have, and we don't have, this colonial legacy. So we have been having all the time many students in Croatia from Asia, from African countries. We are quite open. We have a very strong Muslim community, which is recognized in the Croatian parliament as a minority. They do have their representative in the Croatian parliament. So this is quite important, and Croatia is absolutely ready to be an interlocutor and to use all of our diplomatic skills to make the communication with Africa being better and being on the higher level. We are not forgetting, from our point of view, because Croatia is a Mediterranean state, a very strong focus on Mediterranean, because it's a strategical, vital neighborhood of Croatia, as well as, of course, the Middle East. deserves of our full attention. We know that those regions are very exposed to the Russia influence, and we will not be able definitely to change this situation overnight. It's quite important. We gotta be, of course, absolutely ready to show our visibility on the equal footage with the countries in this region, in Africa, in South America, and in the Middle East, to boost investment projects throughout, to highlighting the role of the global gateway. This is quite important. Croatia is also very much supporting our common idea in the European Union to support enhanced cooperation with Latin American countries. Therefore, there will be a meeting in Brussels, EU CELAC, and we will be actively participating in this platform, and my foreign minister will be traveling very soon to South America to make a trip and to make many bilateral meetings. Now, two more issues which are important for Croatia to understand our diversity and our work on the different layers is that Croatia is now introducing or being the new member of the very strong, important group within the European Union, a Med9 group, supporting the Mediterranean countries and putting a very strong emphasis on the Mediterranean context and component of Croatia. And from the point of the regional cooperation, I will come very soon to the Western Balkans and enlargement policy. We are running the presidency of Adriatic Ionian region. Now we are coming to enlargement process and the Western Balkans, and maybe you, Mr. Ambassador, didn't mention, but I was ambassador to Serbia until 2020, before coming and assuming position of being ambassador. So I think that in the region of the Western Balkans, somebody like to call the region Western Balkans, somebody Southeastern Europe, I think Croatia is playing a very important role as the member of the EU, as the member of NATO, who can be a role model to the countries to see that transformation is possible. The reforms are possible. Now, Croatia as a Mediterranean and Central European country is definitely willing to support all of the countries from the Western Balkans to skip something which is nowadays going on, which was described by the very famous analyzer from Bulgaria, Professor Hrastev. And he mentioned that the region of the Western Balkans went or passed from repression period to depression period. We are all facing depressions and negative information spreading out. So even if you achieved unbelievable successes, sometimes our media is not happy, and it's not easy to appease all of our citizens because simply we are living in such a world. But I think that it's quite important that the regions from the Western Balkans, including Ukraine and Moldova, are moving to the right direction. The right direction are the European integrations. It's quite important to understand that those countries on one side need to keep on having European perspective, so we have to somehow explore the new models, but stick with the European policy, European perspective, and enlargement policy to the Western Balkan countries, and putting high on the agenda Western Balkans in comparison with, for example, Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. Because somehow our feeling is that somebody is nowadays putting in the second layer or sometimes forgetting the importance of the Western Balkans, which the Western Balkan countries are exposed, still exposed, even some of the countries more than before, to the negative, pugnacious role of some other countries. I will only mention Russia, but there are some other countries who are extremely with a huge influence into the Western Balkan countries. So the project needs to go on, and I think that again we have a special responsibility for the West Balkan countries, and absolutely ready to support them on the way to the European Union to create a space of stability and prosperity in the Balkans. I would like to mention one more issue which is important for our position to the Western Balkan countries. Croatia is intending, we are not intending to be the periphery of the European Union. Because being periphery everywhere and anywhere, it's a difficult and risky situation. So therefore, our policy is always very much focused on spreading out Western values, our values, democracy, rule of law, direction, Southeastern Europe. This is the reason why the enlargement process is so important, and we are supporting all of the countries, but in the Western Balkans, but they have to understand they gotta also make domestic reforms. It's not easy to have enlargement policy high on the agenda nowadays. But Croatia will be, of course, very much supportive to the enlargement policy. But the countries, at the same time, the countries in the Western Balkans, they need to understand that they got to make domestic reforms and find solutions for the open issues. I'd like to emphasize one more important issue when it comes to Croatia, and this is our role in energy situation in the European Union. We set up an LNG terminal on the island Krk, and it's a kind of a very important source for diversification of the energy supply for Germany, for Central Europe, as well as for the Western Balkan countries. And we are communicating also with the German side to make additional upgrade of LNG terminal with the European Union. Actually, we will enhance our capacity to 6.1 million cubic meters, because it's quite important that the countries in the Western Balkans have this diversification of the energy supply. There are some countries in the Western Balkans, in the Central Europe, who are highly exposed to the Russia energy, and we'll try to introduce also hydrogen, and this is quite important. Maybe coming back to the Western Balkans to emphasize once again, it's quite important that the countries who are in the process to the European Union stick with the same standards, with the same foreign and security policy which we are undertaking, and also on the other side to implement European policies in the Western Balkan countries, like the Green Agenda, Fit for 55, etc. Now I'm coming to the conclusion, because I want to open the space for another speaker and for our communication. Again, I want to emphasize that it is impossible to be neutral nowadays in Europe. It is very important to stick with multilateralism. I don't see any kind of alternative to UN Charter and for United Nations. Nowadays, only through cooperation we can really find a solution for current crisis and open issues which are absolutely unprecedented. And I want to just finish and conclude my remarks by a strong motto from Dubrovnik. City of Dubrovnik used to be an independent country. For example, Dubrovnik recognized the United States as the first country in the world. Yes. And they used to have a motto: freedom is not sold for all gold in the world. They did understand at that time that without freedom, you cannot make business, you cannot prevail. So this is the motto which we have to understand. Freedom is very important, and you cannot buy it. You have to work on the daily basis, actually ahead, and have a diplomacy who will try to make a solution in order to avoid situations like Russia aggression nowadays. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Bakota. We'll be pleased, as always, to take questions or comments. You can raise your hand and do it first. I'm sorry, please. You may stand also. So you can...
Hello, I'm Renato from Brazil. If I could just make two quick questions. The first one, you mentioned bilateral agreements with South America. Currently, our President Lula has been really focused on pulling together the EU-Mercosur trade agreement. There have been some barriers, and and this is an agreement that has been enchanted, like we say, because it's been 25 years and nothing has been signed. So just would like to hear, when you say bilateral agreements with South America, you are not referring to the UE-Mercosur greater trade agreement. That's the first question. And the second question, if I may, what are your country's thoughts about Serbia joining the EU? Just
what? Sorry, I didn't get you.
Your Croatia's or
Yeah.
yours or your country's thoughts about Serbia joining the EU.
No.
If you could briefly just
Okay.
highlight.
Two issues. Regarding multilateral agreements, we have to be very flexible. Flexible means that once you are in the European Union, we are sharing the same agreements. So something which is, for example, signed by European Union is automatically in power in Croatia. For Croatia, it is not easy on the bilateral level to sign all of the agreements with Brazil, with Argentina, although we have many of those agreements. But I think that the forthcoming EU-CELAC meeting in Brussels will be very important to see whether we can copy on certain agreements or adapt them, because, for example, I think it was a very important and very huge success for European Union to sign this kind of agreement with Canada. Absolutely crucial. And maybe it would be much easier for all of us if we manage to sign this agreement with the United States. Absolutely. So we are trying to do that with South American countries. We are not saying that bilateral countries should not sign those agreements from the European side, like Germany with China or something. I don't know. So I'm not going to go into the details about it. This is not happening. I want to emphasize there is no such a kind of agreement between China and Germany. But if some of the countries manage to sign their bilateral agreements, it would be applicable and be in the frame one day in this multilateral round. So it's quite important. I think that all of us we can benefit. And as I said, with Canada it was a big success. I would be very happy to see the same agreement with the United States and with South American countries and with the African countries. Serbia, yes, we are supporting Serbian way to the European Union. Croatia was never using our membership in the EU and NATO, although Serbia is not willing to join NATO for the time being, to blockade Serbia on the way to the European Union. We are insisting they will never be a kind of, we were never hampered any kind of chapter. We never insisted that some of the chapters in negotiation process with Serbia should not be opened. But we are insisting to see the same standards being applicable and exercised in Serbia. This is good for the country. It's good to have a good neighborhood relationship. It's very important to reach normalization with Kosovo. It is quite important to have good neighborly relationship with all of the countries in the Western Balkans. And it's quite important to see that the rule of law and freedom of media is at stake. Unfortunately, this is not happening in Serbian case. We are patient and we are always introducing and trying to insist that some open issues with Serbia and Croatia will be finally resolved because it is in a way the precondition to join the European Union. If you have missing people from the war and if you are unwilling to share information and data, simply this is from our point of view not in accordance with European values and standards. If you are not recognizing the right of minorities, again, I think it's quite problematic that the country who is not recognizing minorities join the EU. But at the same time, we are willing to support and help Serbia on the way to the EU, and we are very determined to make to make some open issues being fixed between Belgrade and Zagreb. I hope that Serbia, and this is quite important to mention, will also make what is necessary to be done to exercise the foreign and security policy of the European Union, because if you are willing to join the club, you got to abide with those principles. If you are playing Wimbledon, and if there is a rule in tennis in Wimbledon that you got to be in a white dress, you got to wear the white dress. Maybe you can say, no, I'm not willing to join the European Union. This is another story. But again, I touched upon at the very beginning, being neutral, and you cannot be neutral, because if you are neutral nowadays in Europe, you are basically on the side of the Russia aggression. So Serbia needs to understand it and stop with being rather ambivalent, or trying to be ambivalent through the years and years, like, okay, we are somewhere between Moscow, Washington, and Brussels and Peking. I think it's quite important to say, no, this is not possible anymore.
Okay.
Hello, sir. Thank you for the presentation. I am Sher Mashwani from Afghanistan. My question is the role of UN in Afghanistan. They have spent like so much money over the years in Afghanistan on the development and reconstruction of Afghanistan. I will address few problems that they have spent so much money on the education system, healthcare system, and to create sustainable livelihood opportunities for everybody in Afghanistan. But they failed to provide those things to the Afghan people. What do you think? What did they do wrong so that they couldn't fulfill their promises? Thank you.
I will quote one politician who recently mentioned that we are not recognizing the governments, we are recognizing the countries. In terms of Afghanistan, we recognized Afghanistan, of course, as a country. Croatia. I was ambassador to Afghanistan. I presented my credentials to President Karzai. Our troops installation were in Afghanistan from the very beginning, so it was like 10 years Croatian soldiers were in Afghanistan teaching, preparing Afghani soldiers, etc. But I think that we got to say we have a responsibility to our citizens, taxpayers. It means we cannot insist that we will support all the time the regime which is not supporting the basic principles of our countries, because eventually people who are living in Germany, Croatia, United States, they are financing throughout the programs the position of women, children in Afghanistan. I'm not saying that we are not going to continue. Yes, we will continue supporting Afghanistan because of the people in Afghanistan, but we got to work together with the neighboring countries. There are some other neighboring countries of Afghanistan who are extremely important in this regard. In this regard, we have to communicate with China as well, with some other countries, which with Russia is practically impossible nowadays. But I think the mutual multilateral approach to Afghanistan is important, and eventually we should not forget Afghanistan. We got to stay there, but we have to be committed to the basic principles of our societies if we are willing to support people, women, children in education program. It's absolutely unacceptable that the ladies in Afghanistan are not equal or could not participate in the programs. So we have to have a kind of balanced, pragmatic, stick and carrot policy, but very clear voice about what we are trying to do and how to support this friendly country.
Hello, my name is Umut. I'm from Turkey, and you emphasize on the severity of the hard-working war in Ukraine, and also you said it's pretty impossible to stay neutral, but at the same time. When we think about communication channels from the EU perspective, which is pretty limited. And I believe the alienation of Russia is not helpful for anyone, for EU. So I want to ask that, could it be the only way to alienate Russia and cut communication? Thank you.
First of all, it's quite important to understand that we are supporting Ukraine, and there is no alternative. I'm referring to the European Union, the members of the EU, and referring to the members of NATO. So nothing could be done, should be done, which should be at the cost of Ukrainian people, because I already emphasized it's once or today in Kiev or somewhere in Donbas, tomorrow it will be somewhere else, firstly. So this is quite important to be mentioned. There are some initiatives from the other countries. Well, we will see. From South Africa, Turkey is always playing as the plexi state, a very important role. It would be appreciated. Everything what would be acceptable at the end of the day for Kiev. This is quite important. As soon better. But for the time being, we gotta be very, very careful from the European side to stay, to keep on with the unity. The unified position of the European Union is extremely important, and with the Washington, of course. This is quite important. This is the only way how to show Moscow that we are together and that we are not going to get rid of Ukraine and the interests of the people from the principal point of view, but also from the strategical point of view. Diplomacy is about the communication, so we'll see what the future brings. But for the time being, it's quite important to fully support Kiev from our point of view. I think that from nobody's interest is to protect the war, but it has to be acceptable for Ukraine.
I would say on that note, why don't we conclude the formal session for the speech? We had the interactive discussion with Professor Jalali later, so that would be another opportunity maybe for other questions. Or do you want to take one more? Or?
Yes.
Okay, one more in this format, and then we'll continue the other. Please.
Quick question.
Okay, please.
My name is Marika, and I'm actually from Italy, and I love Croatia. I go there every summer. So, I have a question about dealing with the past. We are on German soil, and Germany has done a wonderful job with dealing with its past of the war, the atrocities committed during the war. I wonder if Croatia has any plan to deal with the atrocities committed in the concentration camp of Kampour on the island of Rab and the atrocities committed by the Shah.
Yes, good question, and many thanks for this question, because I didn't mention one important issue which was prepared by my colleague in my speech, and the reason or the proof that Croatia is very committed with dealing with the history or spreading out the memories and real informations about Holocaust is the fact that we are now running IRA. IRA is the international organization which is focused on keeping or supporting all of the schools, lectures, information that atrocities, the genocide, and the Holocaust will never be forgotten. So this is quite important. We are running the presidency of IRA today because it is quite important that the countries who are discussing among themselves, Sweden was very active in this matter, and we took over presidency from your side. Now, throughout multilateral part of our cooperation with the other countries, who are dealing mostly about the financing of the different programs regarding the remembrancy of Holocaust, and regarding the important political definition about the Holocaust nowadays, but also to study and lecture young generation about those unbelievable atrocities and genocide from the Second World War. We are also on the bilateral level here in Germany doing a lot by presenting a lot of the programs regarding, especially focused on the younger generation, but regarding Holocaust. Yes, this is quite important issue, and definitely from my country and for this embassy, zero tolerance for any kind of revisionism or something similar. On the contrary, those are our values, and nowadays we got to be very active in order to especially teach the younger generation, but also certain group of our population. It's quite important to be active and engaged in sport, to spread out the informations, the real informations, and not the fake information about what happened in the Second World War. Yes, this is important issue for us, and it's important policy for Croatia.
Maybe just to jump